little external development throughout most of its history. One can never be certain what great blessings such a path of affliction may eventually bring. The nation qualified to stand as the object partner of God's heart must be a people of goodness. The Korean people, a homogeneous race that maintained its strong culture and tradition during its 4,000-year history of oppression, almost never aggressed toward another nation, a peace-loving and righteous people. Also, a people of religious character. Koreans, by nature, are endowed with a religious character. From ancient times, the Korean people have clearly shown a strong desire to worship God. The Korean flag is virtually the only flag in the world that has a symbol that represents God, surrounded by the natural universe, God in the center of the world. The Korean people's national dress is white robes. Koreans have evoked a deep spirituality toward their traditional faiths of Buddhism and Confucianism. Yet when Christianity entered Korea, despite initial persecution, it took root in a deep and passionate way because the loving heart of the Korean people responded deeply to the ideal of a loving God and Jesus' sacrifice on the cross. As a matter of fact, I can tell you a personal story. As it happens, I was married to a Korean wife, and when I visited my own homeland, my own hometown, a small village of about 20 houses in the farmland, there I found my mother, who had been healed by a Methodist minister, had built a church on the hill on their farm. And every morning when I stayed there at 4 o'clock in the morning, just a few minutes before 4, the bell would ring. And everyone in the village would get up, get out, and climb up to that church on the hill, and we would pray at 4 o'clock every morning. In Seoul, the modern city, you can find also similar examples of churches that are filled with believers for prayer meetings, not once, but several times in the morning. And some of the largest and most prosperous churches can be found there. Next, the Korean people have been a virtuous people. They've always revered the virtues of loyalty, filial piety, fidelity, and chastity. Their fondness for folk tales that express these virtues, like the legend of Chunghyang and others. These kind of tradition of folk tales stems from the powerful underpinning of their culture and the virtuous nature of that culture and the strong values of family and faith and loyalty that are expressed. Next, a nation of messianic prophecy. The Korean people have long cherished a messianic hope, nurtured by clear testimonies of their prophets. The Korean people have believed in the prophecy that a righteous king will appear, found a glorious and everlasting kingdom in their land. This messianic idea, expressed many times, was revealed through the Cheonggam-nok, a book of prophecy that came in the 14th century. Furthermore, among the faithful of every religion, and Korea has a strong foundation of many of the world's faiths. Even Islam has roots in Korea. Among the faithful of every religion are those who have received revelations that the founders of their religion will return in Korea. The returning Christ, with respect to his mission, can be regarded as the fulfillment of all of these expectations, the coming of the founder of every faith. For there will be one Adam, one Christ for the sake of all humanity. Finally, we witness revelations and signs being given to the spiritually attuned Korean Christians. I myself have gone for a walk in the mountains and found prayer meetings of people praying for Christ's return in Korea. As devout Korean Christians make contact with the spirit world, many are receiving revelations that the Lord will come to Korea. And finally, the culmination of all civilizations. If we look at the rise of civilization, it required certain elements like water and commerce through the water and land, etc. Now, the earliest civilizations were river civilizations, built around the Nile, the Tigris, and Euphrates. These civilizations, which arose on the shores of the Nile, Tigris, and Euphrates, passed on their cultures to Mediterranean civilizations of Greece, Rome, and later the Iberian Peninsula, which was Portugal and Spain and France. Likewise, these Mediterranean civilizations, which focused on the sea, coming from the river level to the sea level, these Mediterranean civilizations eventually bequeathed their fruits to the civilizations that were on the Atlantic Ocean, and ultimately, most notably, Great Britain, and that civilization shifted across the Atlantic to the United States. We see a certain flow of civilization here. Now, American civilization has moved also from east to west across the American continent, and we are now entering the Pacific era, and the eyes of the world have been upon the nations called the Tigers of Asia, as we've seen Japan and Singapore and Hong Kong and Taiwan and Korea and others rising rapidly. Now, all these fruits of civilization, as it's developed, will be harvested in the civilizations of the Pacific Rim, which links together the United States, Japan, and Korea. We can see from river to sea to ocean and a flow across from east to west. But likewise, in terms of land, the earliest civilizations were continental, on the continent of Africa and the continent of Asia. Then the Mediterranean civilizations were all peninsular. Greece, Rome, and ultimately the Catholic nations on the Iberian Peninsula of Portugal, Spain, and France. Then, when civilization moved from the Catholic-dominated to the Protestant-based civilization, we find England, an island nation, became the master of the world. The sun never sets on the British Empire. So from continent to peninsula to island. Then, when civilization shifted to America, it was again back to continent. So as we head toward Asia, it should not surprise us that it's a peninsular nation that stands in the position to harvest the fruit of all of these historical civilizations. The spiritual and material aspects of civilization, developing from religion and science that flourished throughout the world, will be embraced and harmonized, guided by the new truth, centered on the spiritual values that arise from this truth, on the foundation of the nation that received it, to create a new global situation. Now, with that, let's consider the parallels between Jesus' day and our own. The period of the Second Advent is parallel to the time of Jesus. The situation unfolding in the world today, centering on Christianity, these issues are similar to those which took place at the time of Judaism at Jesus' time. Religious leaders today, like those of Jesus' day, who adhered too rigidly to institutional authority, too literally to the scriptures and ceremonies, may be the first to persecute Christ at the time of his second advent. We consider the time of Jesus. He didn't limit himself to repeating the words of the Old Testament, but gave new words of truth fit for a new era. And yet, it was difficult for people to receive. The Jewish priests and leaders criticized Jesus' words and deeds based on their literal understanding of the Old Testament scriptures. Should we expect any different? The purpose of Christ at the second advent is to build a new heaven, a new earth, lift humanity to a new level of understanding. He will not repeat the words of the New Testament, but will surely give deeper insight and new words of truth. Therefore, Christians of today, whose minds are narrowly attached to the letter of the law, the letter of the New Testament, may criticize the words and deeds of Christ. Likewise, leaders who are protecting their own position, power, and followers may be the ones to oppose him the most, based on a narrow understanding of the Scriptures, just as happened 2,000 years ago. In Jesus' day, those who sincerely received the gospel were not the Jewish leaders, not the religious leaders, not the ministers and priests and popes and bishops of the time, but simple common folk and Gentiles. Likewise, at Christ's return, simple Christians, people whose simple faith, like the Jews of 2,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, the simple-hearted and pure people, when they heard the teaching of Jesus, they didn't see any contradiction. This didn't undermine or oppose their traditional Jewish faith. It deepened it. It fulfilled it. But the religious leaders felt differently, and Jesus was forced to say, I came not to destroy the law. I came to fulfill it. In this time, it will be similarly people of genuine faith and spiritual preparation who will recognize that this new insight into the truth deepens, resolves, clarifies, and enhances our faith. It doesn't contradict the teaching of the past. So at Christ's return, simple Christians and even non-Christians might accept the Lord's words before the leadership of the body of Christ, which regards itself as the elect ready to receive the Messiah. So both in Jesus' day and the Second Advent, many devout believers who started out on the path of faith with the hope of reaching heaven may actually find themselves opposing and wind up in hell. Recognizing that similar events may occur in the last days as occurred 2,000 years ago, each of us should seriously examine ourselves and reflect once more on our attitude of faith. Finally, the chaotic profusion of languages and the necessity for their unification to make one human family on the face of the earth. If human beings had not fallen, we would have formed one global family. All would have shared a common language. There would never have risen a profusion of tongues. Now, of course, the Bible describes the scattering of people across the earth. But if you think practically about what caused the profusion of many languages, it was simply this. Just as Cain and Abel couldn't unite and had to divide and go to separate places, actually Abel killed, but the brothers struggled. And just as their descendants would fight with each other, couldn't live together and go to another place, then separated from one another, spreading across the earth to find a place where they could avoid contact with those whom they were struggling with, then people simply developed different ways of doing the same things, of saying the same things, of identifying the same things, of living life in similar ways. They developed different languages. Now, as offspring of the same parents, all of us have the same feelings of joy, anger, sorrow, pleasure, yet we cannot share our deepest feelings with one another because we speak different languages. Is not this one of humanity's greatest misfortunes? If we are to realize the ideal world of a global family and honor the returning Christ as a true parent, surely our languages must be ultimately unified. Children should learn the language of their parents. Eventually, all will speak the true parent's language as the mother tongue for all humanity. The point is that all humanity will become one people, one culture, establishing one global nation under God. Now, this doesn't mean that traditional cultures and traditional value systems will be denigrated or removed, but the best of the values of all of our cultures and traditions will be harmonized based on universal ideals to create one global family, one global culture, one nation under God, the kingdom of heaven on earth. It has been my pleasure to share this series on the divine principle with you. I am sure that while new insights have been given, also questions may have arisen. I encourage you to reflect deeply on these things, to study more profoundly the presentations that have already been shared, and to contact your local family federation, get your questions answered, and pursue a deeper course of study. May God bless you, your family, and all whom you love. Thank you.